David, can you give me a bit more on why the dollar is weakening and what that's going to then lead on to mean for equities and...
Well, the problem, I suppose, is the dollar's actually been strengthening in the last couple of months. But if it weakens, that again goes back to the narrative, which is that we have got a synchronized global recovery. And let's be honest, at the moment, that's what the data largely tells us. The data largely tells us, the macro and the economic data largely tells us that the global economy is in reasonably good shape.
Can we know that if until we know what the ECB have said?
Yeah, I think so, because the Eurozone recovery, which is going quite nicely, has slightly slowed down. But the story of the last few years has been kind of stop-start for a lot of economies, possibly the exception of the US has been pretty strong, consistently strong. But a lot of other economies have had a kind of, they do well and then they have a kind of, they suddenly stall, slower growth rate, and then they pick up again. And I think what the equity markets have sort of made the assumption is that, which is why they've continued to do very well with the relative exception of the FTSE 100, is that they've assumed that these kind of these stalls or these slower gears are then sort of ignored after 3 or 4 months, and then you see the economy's picking up again. And that usually tends to come in Q3 and Q4 of most financial years. So I think that the equity markets are sort of gambling on the assumption that the global recovery is probably still pretty strong. America's pretty strong. Europe has had a bit of a kind of little stumble, but will probably find its composure once we've dealt with those stroppy Italians. And that by and large, profits, which they are, profits and earnings are going up. They are reasonably strong at the moment, and there's no sign that they're massively flagging. There are some kind of sectoral weaknesses. And if that's the case, you probably should be net long equities. Things like the S&P 500 would probably be kind of the kind of things you'd focus on at the moment, because the S&P 500 as an index is the clearest way of in a sense, playing that global recovery. As I said, the UK equities are slightly different because UK equities, particularly FTSE 100, is affected by sterling. And sterling is, as we've already mentioned, a slightly independent variable because Brexit sort of is happening independent of that global recovery story. And so when sterling strengthens, that's usually not terribly good news for the FTSE 100. And when sterling weakens, that's usually quite good news for the FTSE 100. So I personally think, in guesstimate terms, that I think the FTSE 100 is quite severely undervalued, and would probably be a bit long the FTSE at the moment. And the reason for that is that I think sterling will weaken because I don't think anybody knows what our Brexit position is. And I also think that sterling is in reasonably strong, UK equities, particularly with their resource focus, are in reasonably strong shape. And we'll come to commodities later. We've got lots of big oil and mining companies that are reporting bumper profits and dividends. And actually, UK financials are in reasonably decent shape at the moment, the big banks. So personally, I think that the gap that you've seen in performance between the FTSE 100 and the S&P 500, with the S&P powering ahead relative to the FTSE 100, I think is a little exaggerated. And I would think that if we are in a global recovery, which I think on balance we probably still are, then I think you might see the FTSE 100 be seen to be undervalued and maybe at that point outperform. I said all bets are off, though, if the kind of dollar strengthening argument is that we're actually heading into more volatile times and the global economy is stalling and the US is near the top of the cycle. And that's keep going back to it. The FX markets, you've got to listen to what they're telling you. And at the moment, because the dollar strengthening, they're sort of telling you to watch out.
Sure.